Welcome to season 3 of Conversations with Nation. I am the creator, Brittny Nation. Make sure that you like and subscribe and follow and comment all the things because this shit take work. And don't be a hater, you know what I'm saying? And if any questions come up during the episode, please throw them in the comment section as we will be having a live with our interviewees about a week after each episode. So you can get your questions answered. If you'd like them to be anonymous, you can go on over to our DMs on Instagram at The Nation Network and drop them in there as well. Hope you enjoy the episode.
I'm gonna do my therapy sit. That's how I sit when
She said I wore my most responsible outfit.
my most trustworthy.
I feel like people gonna believe me in this one. They gonna believe you in that outfit, baby.
I can't come in a clueless outfit. That's definitely what I be wearing.
You are, you know what I'm saying, the therapist for hood niggas and bad bitches.
I am.
So I was low-key expecting the cheeks to be out a little bit, but.
No, because listen, when I'm trying to establish myself as a brand and people don't really know that I'm the therapist for hood niggas and bad bitches, I want to establish myself in a professional regard. Okay. So motherfuckers know that I know what the fuck I'm talking about first, and then I can pop out on them.
Okay, you know I'm keeping all of this, right?
That's fine. I said what I said. That's fine.
What the fuck I said.
So that's fine. That's fine.
So I am very excited. I am being blessed and graced with the presence of King the Lady.
Don't forget
the motherfucking lady.
And it's Mrs. to you bitches. Okay, come on.
Period.
Not yet, but you know.
And correct me when I lay these out. Correct me if I say any of these wrong. So, your degree is in psychology.
One of them, yes.
I was getting to the other 3.
Okay. I didn't mean it like.
Okay. Your master's is in counseling.
Yes.
And the PhD that you are in the process of getting is in marriage and family therapy.
Yes.
Yes. And you specialize in what I would call sex therapy. Can you clarify that if that's?
Yes. So I specialize in sexual exploration and trauma. So there's a difference. You do have licensed sex therapists. I am not a licensed sex therapist. So that's not what my license is in. My license is in counseling. But within that regard, one of my specialties is sexual exploration and sexual trauma. So that's sexual assault in any regard, sexual harassment, or, you know, if there are certain people that experience genital trauma as a child, and so as an adult, it's kind of difficult for them to have pleasurable moments. Yeah. And so we kind of talk about that as well.
Okay, so all of that to say you're that bitch, been that bitch, and forever gonna be that bitch.
Period. And
very qualified to have this conversation.
Yes. Yes.
Because I wanted to kind of open the conversation up around sexual liberation. I really wanted this entire season to be, each topic that I do, to really be focused on looking at like not only the context of what the culture is now, but also we're always in flux and change, right? Society is always shifting in some way, shape, or form. So a lot of the conversations I wanted to have are really focused on what is the possibilities of what the future could be. Right? And I wanted to have those conversations with people who are very well versed and very well knowledgeable. And you are all of those things because, you know, Mrs. Hello, King the motherfucking lady. So my intro to this space of this conversation is actually I want to start through the lens of hypersexuality.
Yeah.
So when I first wrote the questions for this, that really wasn't where I wanted to start, but I've just kind of learned that as themes start to pop up in my life consistently, go down the rabbit hole, see where it takes you. And as someone who has personally been practicing abstinence for a minute, it has made me kind of start to step back and look at the landscape of hypersexuality in a different way. because I'm not necessarily engaging in like sex right now. So it's kind of been like, oh, interesting. And the very first thing I kind of want to start with is like, what is hypersexuality? Because I do feel like that's a term similar to like narcissism right now, where it's like everybody wants to just throw out that word, but there's a actual clinical definition of what this is. And there might be acts that I view as hypersexual, but really may not be that definition. So how would you define hypersexuality?
I think it's anything outside of the societal norm. And the societal norm is based upon definitions that we as the people create. So whatever that is what hypersexuality is in that moment in time, because society changes, the norms change, the ideals change. So it's kind of hard to answer that question because it's subjective for one, but then it's also ever changing. It's not necessarily a constant definition.
So in this moment of time now, how you're saying like what would be determined as hypersexual is some kind of act around sex that is outside of the norm.
Does hypersexuality even exist right now?
Hello, let's talk about that.
Like, because I'm just thinking about society as a whole in this moment, and I'm trying to see like what area of life would I say to use as an example as hypersexual. Like even on social media, you can be as revealing as you want to be. Sure, you have people that are opinionated, but it's accepted. Or OnlyFans, it's very popular, which OnlyFans wasn't necessarily meant to be what the norm or what the ideal is for it now, but that's what people know it as. It's a lot of things that we do in our society now that can be hypersexual, but it's very normalized and it's wildly accepted. So like, how can I even say those things are hypersexual? Lord, Kevin Samuels, get your cousins. Lord.
Okay, not that nigga came back from the dead. To be like, y'all bitches talk about fucking.
Not before marriage, just low value. Get your ass on.
Get your ass on with that.
So, Lord, he wants some more.
Lord wants some more. So would you, my next question would have been, would you characterize American culture as hypersexual? But to your point, you're kind of saying in the norm, but you also have some experience in other cultures, right? Because you're part Nigerian. In comparison, would you probably look at American culture as hypersexual, or do you think other cultures view us as hypersexual?
I think both. Okay. So if we look from a lens of like the 50s, right, when most women were housewives or trying to pursue that status of being a housewife because we didn't really have a lot of rights. We were property. So a lot of what we did was very reserved because the patriarchy of our world, they didn't want women that were revealing and showing themselves to other men. They wanted something that they could keep to themselves. And fast forward to now, it's kind of like women are taking volition over their own bodies, making their own choices, and kind of taking charge of like that standard that was placed upon us. We're kind of flipping the script in a way, and we're doing whatever we want to do, which pop your shit if you want to pop your shit. But I'm a pro-hoe therapist, so if you want to, get your coochie pop, I'm with it, but be safe about it. But fast forward to now, I would say it's more hypersexual than 20s, 50s, because a lot of women were very reserved, and the women that were rebels, quote unquote, they were more so outcasts. Whereas now, if you're hypersexual, if you're twerking on Instagram, if you're twerking at a concert, people have things that they say about it, but it's still wildly acceptable.
Do you feel as though in like hitting that point or progressing through that space of liberation for women to go from having to, be covered up and silent and all those things to where we are now, I feel like there would be people that would argue that like the pendulum swung too far. Like it didn't recenter. And I don't think you would say that, but I would argue that there would be people who would say in that space of liberation that it swung too far to the left. What would you say to that?
I think it can. Mm-hmm. I think that we're close.
Ah, okay.
And I say that because with that liberation, you get a sense of arrogance. You get a sense of, I don't need you. When really, if we talk about the dynamics of family, we need each other. Mm-hmm. Like even in society as a community, we need each other. And so the liberation part is good because it's empowering, but it also keeps you stagnant because if you're growing in one area, you're not growing in the other one because you're so focused on, no one can tell me what to do with my body. I can do what I want to do. When your partner is simply saying, I would rather you do X, Y, and Z. Let's come to some type of compromise. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to move or shift your life into a direction that includes a family or includes another person, then you're going to have to include their perceptions as well. And I think there are some people that don't do that, so.
That's interesting. Yes, I agree. I was interested to hear your opinion because you have such a specific or such a unique stance because you are pro-ho. You know what I'm saying? And I am honestly too. I'm like, do what you want to do it. Like, and to your point, be safe, right? And honestly, be honest. Mm-hmm. That is my other thing. Mm-hmm. And that kind of takes me into my next thought around like, when we talk about the education around sex, right? America, in my opinion, does a horrible fucking job at it as a teacher and as a person who taught health for a year. How we teach kids, and I don't believe that it should be only a teacher having that conversation with a kid, among many other things, but how we teach kids about sex, their bodies, sexual orientation, all of those things, I think we do it horribly. When you think about what could be the possibility of how we educate kids around sex and even understanding their bodies, I would love to hear like how you think that should be done. Like, what are all the components that would need to play into actually developing a human being who is like healthy in regards to their understanding of sex, understanding of themselves, and understanding of like their choices around sex?
I think as adults, we have to be comfortable with having those conversations first in order to be honest, like you're saying. But I think there are a lot of adults that wouldn't be honest. There are some that would be, of course, but there are a lot of adults that would not be honest. There are a lot of parents that would not like those type of conversations to be had at school. Like they want to be present for those conversations. And I think that's fair. So I think those are a lot of the challenges initially that kind of stop us or challenge us in that direction, like talking to students, talking to kids, teenagers, or even young adults about sex and their bodies, because there's a lot of women and men in their 20s who still are uneducated about their bodies. But I think it kind of starts there. There are some schools in this area actually that have started to have like mental health classes that talk about just the mental health, different diagnoses, different things that people can experience. And so maybe since we're shifting in that direction, that will lay the foundation for talking about sex in a healthy, responsible way.
Do you think that is too complex for like a teacher to try to take on?
I think it's too complex for one person, irrespective of what their career path is. I think that should be a collective conversation with healthcare professionals, with therapists that specialize in that, with the teacher as well, because they need to learn their students and what they might be experiencing because they deal with them every day. You know, the healthcare professionals or the therapists that come for that collective conversation, they're not going to be there all the time. So I think everyone's part is invaluable.
Okay. And then like when we think about educating around that, I always think about ethical non-monogamy, which is, sorry, I saw your face. The first time I ever heard that term was probably in the last 2 years, for me specifically. I'm sure it's been established prior to, but that's the first time I've heard that term. And interestingly enough, I heard it through the lens of polyamory. But as I understand it, there's something about it that makes me feel as though that might be worth, if not teaching with the intention of like indoctrination, but at least presenting onto the table. Because what I think happens is, how I look at ethical non-monogamy is any relationship in which you're engaging with multiple people, whether or not it's like, okay, my mind, I look at it as you could have a committed relationship with somebody that's established verbally and also be doing some other shit, right? Or you could also have an open relationship where it's like, oh, I'm not in a committed relationship. I'm out kind of like moving through the field, doing what I want to do, right? Or I'm sure other versions of that exist as well. And when I think about ethical non-monogamy, I think about it through the lens of like, finally like being honest about what it is that you're actually doing or what it is that you're not doing, and having those open lines of communication with everybody that's involved so that people are allowed to make informed decisions for themselves, as opposed to, I think this American society often pushes these, Christian ideals, and I air quote that because I don't believe this society is Christian in any way, shape, or form, that the only way to go about things is to go through it through a monogamous lens, or you have to go through this thing of like ownership almost of like, that's my partner and nobody else is allowed to, you know what I'm saying? But we don't even talk about the possibility of how do you go about this. And I'm specifically thinking about my experience in my teens in dating, my experience in my 20s. And during my 20s, I was very particular, after getting divorced, I was very particular that I did not have a desire to get married or necessarily be in a like long-term committed relationship. But I didn't have the word ethical non-monogamy to kind of like, be in my sphere of understanding. And I thought to myself, it would be interesting if we taught, or at least introduce people to the idea of how to be able to like move through relationships with a bit more honesty and transparency and self-awareness of what they do or don't want, and being able to like translate that and communicate that with others. So the first start of that question is, how do you define ethical non-monogamy?
Well, one, as I listen to you speak, you talked about basic relationship 101. Like you should like have these honest conversations with people, irrespective of what the title or what the label of the relationship is. That should be something that you do with people in general, in all relationships, is to communicate about what you want, what you don't want, set boundaries. That's like relationships 101.
Yes, and I think learning the term ethical non-monogamy was the first time I was like, I think this is what most people are doing anyway. Well, they're not being ethical, is what I'm saying. Is if you had, to your point, if we had healthy relationships, then most relationships, until you choose to actually commit in a monogamous space, if that is what you choose, is ethical non-monogamy, or what it should be in theory.
Well, but also, like, it's semantics, because you describing what your perspective of ethical non-monogamy is.
Kevin is coming.
You describing, like, your viewpoint on it is essentially what poly is. Because, so people assume that poly is just, oh, we sleep with whoever we want to sleep with, and I mean, that's basically what it is as well. Like, ethical non-monogamy sounds like a cleaned up version, a well-suited version, a more acceptable label to put on a relationship rather than polyamorous. And to me, it just seems that way. One, because if you say that you are non-monogamous, that is already poly. Like, just saying non-monogamous in itself, that means that our relationship is not synonymous just to us. We're not just you and I in a relationship. We are this person, that person, whoever we want to involve in the relationship, right? Just offhand, and that's poly. Now, the way that you go about it, I guess, would be your term, ethical non-monogamy.
You can take all I do is hear terms. I want you to place them how they should be placed appropriately.
Well, we talk about ethics, though. Like, we talk about being ethical. It's being honest, being like having a oath that you uphold. And so I guess that's the foundation of the relationship, those conversations that you have initially about what you want and what you don't want. I guess, makes it ethical to me, but you can still have ethical poly relationships as well. And again, non-monogamy is not us not being committed just to one another, and poly is not being committed just to one another in some form or fashion, if that makes sense. So ethical non-monogamy seems to be, to me, the same thing as having a polyamorous relationship. There's no difference. It's like a cleaned up version. Like, you don't want to say poly because it sounds dirty, so you want to say ethical non-monogamy. No, bitch, y'all are dating other people. Y'all are talking to other people. That's poly all the fuck day long.
Yeah. Do you think most people are, well, I guess that's an interesting question because I don't need you to comment on what we think most people are thinking. But I think in this society, because we have this, like, everything has to be in this realm of monogamy, why do you get this? I get the sense that most people are not open to, like, the word polyamorous. Like, they hear that and they are like, no. You know? Or even if I feel like I were to say ethical non-monogamy, which is, you know, maybe synonymous, it's like, no, right? Even if that is actually what you're engaging in, right? But people will call them situationships and be okay, right?
Right. It's semantics. Like,
right?
It's the same thing. 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Same thing.
So what is that, like, what is that divide? Like, what is that thing that stops us from being able to be like, let's just call it what it is?
Not understanding, because I'm an illustrative person versus just giving, like, I don't know if you notice this when you ask me to define something, I give examples. I'm more illustrative in my vocalization. So let's say, do you have someone from your past that you still have feelings for?
No.
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 I've never gotten that. Wow. Okay. Took me for a loop. Took me for a loop, y'all. Okay.
Wait, how do you, well, actually, let's take a step. How do you define that?
Well, once you have love for a person.
Boom. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
I thought sorry, when I heard that, I thought, is there someone from your past that you have feelings for in a way in which you would like to pursue something at some point later in life?
No, see,
and
I didn't even ask you all that. I said, do you still?
But yes, the two people in my life that I designate that I have loved, I will love them until I die.
Okay.
'Cause that's just how I think love goes.
Okay, so when you pursue a new relationship, would you still have communication with those two people? It could be hi, bye, how you doing?
Right now, one yes, one no.
Okay, so with the one yes.
Okay.
If you met someone new and you were like, okay, this is a person that I'm gonna spend this moment in time with, we're gonna be together, and that person says, I don't want you communicating with this person, what would you do?
Ooh, first of all, why do questions come back to me?
I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna come back. It's gonna come full circle.
No. I'm totally down for that. I would have to. It would have to be a conversation. It wouldn't be an immediate no. It would have to be a conversation, and only because my gut reaction is you tripping. Because I know myself and I trust myself that whatever you think is possibilities of could happen is not going to happen. But to your earlier point, I also would have the consideration of, like, if I'm choosing to be in partnership with another person, I don't know the aspects of their past or what triggers what. And if I'm choosing them, I have to at least consider. But my gut reaction would be, nigga, you tripping.
So your heart, a piece of your heart at least, is it remains with a previous relationship. Although you are beginning a new journey with someone else, your heart is already poly.
Ooh.
So the love is not going anywhere, as you said, but when you enter into this new relationship, you said your gut reaction is to be like, nah, this ain't it. Okay, you know, you're still leaning towards a love that you experienced before, but because you want something new, you are considering the idea of what your partner is saying. That's ethics.
Okay.
Ethical non-monogamy. It doesn't have to mean that you're dating the person that you loved previously or that you had a relationship with previously. It just means that my heart is not only for you. I can love many people and many things, not just you. So it takes out the possession.
Okay. You're right.
Ethical non-monogamy. Like, so when you have these conversations with a potential partner or with your partner, it doesn't have to be, hey, I'm interested in someone else sexually. How would you feel about me pursuing this? It could be, hey, I like this person's conversation. I feel like I actually get value out of having a conversation with them. How would you feel about us being friends? Mm-hmm. Not pursuing anything sexually, not pursuing any dates, anything romantic undertoned. Just, I want this person to be my genuine platonic friend, but a piece of my heart is with that person because I feel deeply about them, deeper than a friend, but not necessarily romantically. Mm-hmm. So that could be poly or non-monogamous as well. It doesn't have to be dirty, quote unquote. It doesn't have to always equate to sex. It could be emotional as well.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider yourself to then be non-monogamous? We don't have to answer that. Cut that.
No, we fine. We can answer. Okay. No, I don't consider myself to be non-monogamous because
You don't consider yourself to be so you consider yourself to be monogamous?
No.
Wait, you're saying you do consider yourself to be non-monogamous?
So, no. Okay. I'm saying that I don't use those labels.
Oh, okay.
Now, we could talk about the labels and the labels that people choose to use, but I don't choose to use those labels. Now, the scenario that I gave you, do I also experience that? Yes, but that does not mean that, like you said, I don't want anything with that person. If I did, I could have had that prior to me meeting you.
The fuck?
That's not what I want. Yeah. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't get any value out of still continuing a relationship with this person, because even though we experience people romantically, it doesn't mean that in a new era of our lives, we can't have a different experience of them.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people experience people romantically and that's just that. We can't be friends, we can't be nothing else. But that's not how evolution works. Like if you think about relationships in terms of evolution, they can be ever changing. Like when we started our friendship, our connection, it was kind of, it was the initial relationship growth, but then as we continue to build and form and cultivate a relationship with one another, we grew closer. And that's essentially how our romantic relationships could potentially work as well. But people are like one-track minded. If I'm not dating you, having sex with you to get married, to have a baby, that's it. But I don't necessarily live in those terms. Like, what am I able to gain from you? How is this relationship serving me? If not romantically, does it serve me in a different way? And I think about that. But also, my relationship isn't necessarily built on possession. That's a choice that my partner and I have chosen to make. We had those ethical conversations, if you will, because our relationship is built upon the truth and realism. Because sometimes people are like, for some reason, people don't want their partners to admit that other people are sexually attractive or that they may be interested in that person if they weren't in a relationship. You can admit that. That's cool. I might point somebody out to my partner, but that's neither here nor there. But the point is,
especially a bad bitch.
If you see her, point her out, there she go. But the point is, I don't necessarily use those labels. I'm exclusive, sexually exclusive, romantically exclusive to the person that I am cultivating a life with. But that's not to say that I'm not going to be attracted to someone else. That's not to say that I might have a conversation with the opposite sex and be like, oh, okay, they kind of cool. But I also respect my partner enough to have those conversations to see how they might feel.
Yeah. How do we increase our capacity to get to that point? Because I think that openness, that honesty that you have with your partner, I don't know that I would call that typical as far as what our culture pushes on us, right? So like, how do we as individuals begin to increase our capacity to be able to hold space for all of that, because for some people hearing that might feel scary. That might feel like it's this like lack of control. And to your point, relationships aren't meant to be about control. I don't believe that love is about control. I think love is not about control or manipulation. And there's a lot of nuanced ways we act in both of those spaces to be able to get like our needs met in some way, shape, or form, right? So as individuals who have to grow and evolve, you know, like how do we begin to like do the work to increase what is the work, I guess, to increase our capacity to hold space for like, this is a whole human with complexity. I'm a whole human with complexity. And like, we can do all of this and like hold space for all of this at the same time is really what I'm trying to say.
I think that's the beginning. Like, people don't live lives based on that principle, or most people don't. So once they, I guess, get to a certain point where they can listen to that principle that you just gave and then actually digest it, and not digest it to immediately reject it, but actually truly understand what you're saying. And once they understand what you're saying and they kind of explore what that looks like or what that could look like for their lives, I think the work goes into insecurities. Like, if you ever think about like not wanting your partner to do certain things, and you truly think about like, why did that bother me? Why was that a trigger for me? Is it something that I'm insecure about? Is there something that I had an issue or concern with just intrinsically, and now I'm projecting onto that person just because they're attracted to someone else or they made a comment about someone else? What is it? And so you have to be more inquisitive and self-aware so that you can work on those things. So it's kind of subjective. It depends on the person, but I think we all have to be self-aware and be inquisitive within ourselves to figure out, what are we insecure about? Or what's bothering us about this situation, so that we can rectify it and take steps to move forward.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a curveball. This is coming up naturally as we talk. So if there was a couple watching this right now, watching this together, and you know, this is the first time they've really given consideration to like something more than just the typical idea around monogamy, what would be some kind of like questions or something that you would encourage them, or like talking points you would encourage them to start this conversation between each other?
I would encourage them to start with talking to themselves intrinsically. I wouldn't suggest that they start a conversation or a dialogue together. I would actually ask them to explore what they truly want, because you have some people that are just going along with the non-monogamy because of the other person, and they want to please the other person. They're exploring it because they want to make the other person happy. So I would urge and encourage them to think about what they truly want, and if exploring a non-monogamous relationship is what they truly want, then I would open that up to a dialogue.
Y'all better talk. Talk to yourselves first. You know what I'm saying?
But the conversation between the two people in the relationship, I think it should start with why. Like, why do you want to explore this? How is this, again, serving you? What do you get out of this? Is it something that you are missing in the relationship? Is there a deficit? And a lot of couples don't like to talk about the deficits because they personalize it. Oh, well, I thought I did enough of that. You're saying that I don't do that? You know, it's not about you. Everything is not about you. Your partner has things that they require. They have things that they desire. And you might not be able to fulfill all of those things. We like to think that we are the end all be all, but you are not.
Yeah.
And so when you consider the deficits that not only your partner is experiencing, but that you are also experiencing, then you can live a happy, healthy life, because y'all can work on it, you can communicate, you can talk about it and try to fill those deficits, or you can seek outside sources in that non-monogamous relationship.
Okay. Got some things to challenge us to do. And I want to take a little bit of a left. So I thought that was really, really good. One of the other things that I had wrote to you about was this idea around sexual liberation and where you think we're at as a Black culture. So my thoughts and experience is that when we talk about sexual liberation, a lot of times I experienced it talked about through the lens of women in general, right? But when I think about sexual liberation for Black men, I'm very interested of not only what that looks like, but like where that kind of like starting point is. So my first question to you would be, where do you think we're at? And I don't really know how to even gauge that, if that's on a scale or whatever, but like in comparison to Black women and Black men, when it comes to sexual liberation as a culture, like where do you think we're at?
We're divided, very much divided. So there's layers to that question because one, as people of color, you have some people that don't identify as male or female, but so it adds layers to the humans that exist within the community of people of color. That's for starters. But then if we're just kind of narrowing to men and women, we have different ideals, we have different perspectives based on our gender, but we also have different ideals and perspectives based on our experiences. So there's a lot of layers to that, but I want to start answering your question with liberation not only includes being able to do what you want to do or not being caged. Liberation also includes having parameters. Like when we think about being sexually liberated or liberated in any way, we think about being unchained, uncaged. And I urge us to consider that that's not only what liberation is. Liberation is about having standards, having parameters to which we are liberated. Because if we don't have parameters that govern us or govern the liberation, we would just run amok sexually. Because that's what we're talking about. But
that's real.
And then we're unsafe, we're diseased, we pass away. That's not a happy, healthy sex life. Like we need parameters to govern the liberation that we do experience. So I would start there.
Yeah. And I think part of that question for me is also not, I asked it as sex, but I think part of that is for me is even just like personal expression. Because I don't even want to limit it to gender expression. But like when I think about Black men in this American culture, I feel as though like that ability of self-expression is always like kind of tapered in. Like it's got to come through these lenses, these specific ways. Otherwise you are this, you're that, you're sus, you're this, you're like all of these things. Sassy, you're all of these different things. And I don't feel as though we allow enough space. And I do believe that also translates like sexually. So I know I've said this before, whether it's right or wrong. I know I have said before that my experience sexually with a man, he wasn't Black, but a man that lived in Europe and was European by birth is very different than my experience sexually with men that are from America. And there is a lot more room in that. There's a lot less that is taboo. There's a lot more like openness and fluidity of what could be. So when you look at our culture and expression for Black men, whether that's I don't know if it would be called a gender expression, but also like, any level of fluidity, right? Like, what do you see? What do you think are some of the issues, and more importantly, like, what is the possibility of what we could get to?
I don't necessarily think we are as liberated as we might think that we are as a culture because of some of those stereotypes that come when a man of color paints his nails, or if he wears a certain type of clothing, or if he likes something sexually that's out of the norm, that's more so in the kink community. It's like, oh, that's a little sus, but it's because of sheer ignorance and not understanding that sexual proclivities don't necessarily have to come from a certain type of sex, if you will. Let me explain. So you have some men that like anal pleasure. And that doesn't necessarily have to come from another man. He could be heterosexual and like anal pleasure. But because we have been, we have been programmed to believe that anal pleasure means that you are homosexual, that is incorrect. And that's misinformation. But understanding that that is misinformation also gives us the segue, I guess, to explore more. And it's kind of like unlocking a part of your mind. Once you begin to explore more, once you begin to think for yourself and truly live in your truth and what your desires and what your proclivities are, you can then be liberated. But while you're still in mental captivity, you're not going to experience that liberation, whether it be sexual or career-wise, or what you want to do with your family, what you want to do with your kids, just in your life in general. If you are still mentally chained and in bondage, you're not going to be liberated in any form. So I think that it starts there. I don't think that we are as liberated as we would like to think that we are, because we are still very much so mentally in bondage.
Kanye said that.
Yeah, but they like to call him crazy, but said a lot of right things. I'm just gonna say that.
I'm like, that's the clip. No. All this great conversation, just that one part where I'm like, Kanye said that. No, because I think that when I think about where I would like us to be as a culture in a healthier place, there is something about, specifically again, focused on the Black male for me, because I feel like I don't necessarily always see like beacons of that liberation, or that people are bought into beacons of that liberation in some form. So I feel like with women, there is a lot more people that we can kind of see and look at and draw from. Kevin Samuels. But with men, I think that even when you have like these people, and we have a culture of idolatry, right? Like, and celebrity. And it's like when we see these certain things, because it doesn't fit these narratives, like it's automatically a shutdown. Like a man wearing a skirt or a dress gets like made into this big hoopla where I'm like, you understand in other cultures, like that happens all the time. Like that's not a new thing.
Yeah.
But when we think about specifically Black men, and I'm kind of curious, and not to ask you about like your experiences and your clients, because that's confidentiality. When you think about like how we can get closer and closer to evolving into a space of being a bit more liberated, like what are your thoughts around how that can happen?
Well, one thing that you said when you talked about culture and those cultural differences, and I'm just thinking about myself as a clinician, I consider myself to be culturally competent, and I consider myself to be culturally competent because I'm able to understand that those normatives that happen here in America or within certain subsets of cultures don't necessarily happen within other cultures. There are some professionals that do not understand that. They are very biased to their culture and their reality. So when they are serving someone that's outside of the culture that they know, they automatically assume that something is wrong with them. And so it's very important for people to seek professionals, irrespective of what the career path is, or what the if it's mental health or if it's physical care, anything like that. It's very important to have a culturally competent professional, because, and as you said, I can't necessarily speak about specific clients, but just in my career, I have met a lot of people, not just Black people, but just people that are unheard, unseen, whether it be sexually or mentally, because of those cultural differences. So it is very important that we as a people understand that those differences exist. You understand that, I understand that, but there's a lot of people that are just like, what? They washing their chicken? Yeah, we wash our chicken. You know.
Yes, we wash our chicken.
With lemons and limes sometimes too, but you know.
Typically.
But so I think it's important to understand that too. But I digress. I just got stuck on that because that's something that I know that I'm very passionate about when it comes to cultural competency, because within my career, I have had conversations with a lot of people about their sexual proclivities, and they're very unhappy because people tell them that they are wrong about having those proclivities. And a lot of times it's the common denominator in that is lack of competency and understanding the culture that that person comes from. So as a Black woman, as a mental health professional working with Black men and having these conversations around their childhoods, sex, them currently dating, their careers, them being a father, I would say that childhood is a very good place to start, because I think sex is how do I say? Because I don't want to be subjective. I guess all of this is subjective. But how do I say? I believe that childhood is a great initial place to start. Because again, with mental bondage, how can you truly be your freest self, whether it be sexually or in any other realm, if you still have a lot of things holding you back, especially a lot of things in your formative years holding you back mentally? Like, sex is a very mental thing. Like, you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced stress, and then, but also wanting to feel relieved in a sexual manner. But you're like, oh, my mind is just elsewhere. Like, I'm thinking about my job. I'm thinking about all these other things going on. My bed tonight ain't the night. And so that's a lot of what Black men experience as well. Stress with having to be a provider or not having enough money to provide in the way that social media likes to portray that people are supposed to do. But neither here nor there.
I'm like, girl, the conversation about the way we tell Black men that their worth is only associated to a dollar amount stresses me out, but we ain't got to do that.
But to your point, I think that patriarchy is the problem. So a lot of men, this still on track, a lot of men complain. That sounded really insensitive as a therapist.
They vocalize
disdain.
There we go.
Okay, so they vocalize disdain for a woman not pursuing them sexually first. Like, they have to always be the person to lead. Or even their spouse not wanting to give fellatio or not knowing how to give fellatio. But on the other side, when patriarchy comes in, when a woman takes volition over her body and she knows what she's doing, she knows what she wants, and she actively seeks partners that she wants, she a hoe. So what do you want? Do you want a woman that's sexually liberated that can please you in the regard that you want her to? Or do you want someone inexperienced that is not willing to learn what you want to teach her, and she just wants to do all the vanilla things? Like, what you want? You can't have it both ways. So
I'm laughing because you called me vanilla one time.
Well,
you're like, what are your kinks? And I was talking, you're like, that would be described as vanilla.
I mean, it came across very basic. I was like, that's a kink. But again, culture. You know, in some cultures, what you describe may be a kink. And in other cultures, it might be, you know, a normative. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, but I think that plays a large role. Like, when I have conversations with Black men, they want a woman to listen, do all the patriarchal things.
Yeah. But
then they want a freak. They want a slut. And it's like, I'm not saying that she can't be traditional and a slut, because hello, I exist. But I'm saying you have to give grace as well. And you have to have conversations, that ethical conversation, to understand what your partner is willing to do, what direction they're willing to grow in. And if you aren't willing to do that, if you still want to stay in that patriarchal mind frame, or if you're still allowing your childhood to hinder you, you can't experience that fluidity in sex that you might want to as a Black man.
And that's kind of goes to my like last question. You really hit on a lot of it, I think, which was like, in your opinion, do we as the American culture view sexuality through a very Eurocentric lens?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But again, that's subjective. The reason I don't think so is because sex sells. And we like to, as a society, we like to say that you should preserve something for marriage and that should be the goal. But on the opposite end, when you advertise for things, you advertising for perfume and the person is naked. Mm-hmm. You're advertising for food, the person is naked. Mm-hmm. You're advertising for a business or working from home and the people were naked. So how can you say that we're this reserved culture in society, but all of your advertisements, people are naked? What does that say? Mm-hmm. So I think we have to think about what we are being conditioned to believe as opposed to what people are saying. Because a pair of lips can say anything, but what are you conditioning your people to believe? Like, we should start there. Mm-hmm. Because when you think about how media, how the government, how societies condition their people through illustration, that's where you can truly see what they believe in. Not through what they're saying, but how they're conditioning their people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
When you think about how this country specifically conditions its people, what are like some of the kind of like I guess my mind says negative side effects. I don't know if that's a proper word. Some of the negative side effects that come from conditioning us in the way that we do in this country. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's a difference between youth versus adults in your mind in that answer, but if there is, if you could.
It is.
Okay.
It is. So, well, yes, they're kind of tied, but so I have 2 points. So one is people of color. I lost my train of thought. Ask my question. Ask the question again, because I was going somewhere. I got so in my head about it.
So you were saying that, like, really how we could look at it is how does our society condition us, right?
I got it.
Oh, go ahead.
I got it. It popped in. So just people of color, sex is one of the far most used tools for torture and enslavement.
Hello.
Like, that is one of the number one weapons, sex. And so when you think about people of color or women of color, let's start with women of color. You had to breed. If you wanted to be free, you had to breed a certain number of offspring, and then you could be free. If you did something wrong, quote unquote, you were naked and berated and paraded with the whole community watching. Mm-hmm. And then for Black men, you have buck breaking.
Yeah.
So we are not only going to embarrass you and diminish your manhood in front of your family, mm-hmm. we're going to utilize sex as a tool mm-hmm. to demean you. And then you fast forward to now, or no, let's go back to the 90s, where you had a lot of physicians that were saying that Black people breed irresponsibly. Mm. You think 100 years of you gotta have 20 babies to be free, you think? Mm-hmm. You give people nothing but the scraps that you have in communities that don't serve them. What you think? Yeah, I'm a fuck because that's all I got. I need to feel good. Mm-hmm. I'm either gonna fuck or do drugs. Which mm-hmm. one? Because my job don't pay me enough. You want me on welfare, but you're not giving me. So, I mean, you have conditioned these people with your inhumane tactics. Mm-hmm. What do you think? So when you have organizations like Planned Parenthood, that's all I'm gonna say. When you have organizations like that, that for years considered we as people of color to breed irresponsibly. And you have doctors in the 90s and, you know, all of that think that. And you have birth control and like all these forms to reduce the amount that we have children based off stereotypes, based off misinformation about who we are as a people. I think that liberation that we are seeking is to not be judged. Sometimes it's not, I want to do what I want to do. Sometimes it's, I'm not even doing anything and you're judging me. You know?
Yeah.
So part two of that is with children, more specifically women. Again, more specifically women, we are told, oh, well, you know, you're getting old. You're 30, you don't have any kids, you're 40, you've never been married, you know, but then there's this, oh, he turned 40 and, you know, a switch went off and he just got a younger woman. Okay. Well, when you think about child pornography, when you think about what has been highly rated on porn sites, you know, teenage daughter with stepdad or teenage, like when you think about all of those things and you think about how we as women in reality are treated, we're getting of a certain age. Oh, now it's time to go to something younger. I feel like, and this is subjective, I feel like that ideology, it projects molestation, child pornography, because if a woman in her 30s is not suitable for a 35-year-old man, who is? If a woman in her 40s is not suitable for a man her age, who is? And so when men begin to look at younger and younger and younger and younger women, and then you wonder why they're attracted to teenage girls that are filling out, is because they are actively seeking a younger woman, because that's what society conditions us to do as a people. Roundabout way to say that our society has totally fucked our sexual exploration and experiences. And if you want to experience your own sex life, like truly what you want, and experience your own volitions, you have to get out of that societal viewpoint or vantage point and like actually decide, what do I want? Do I want to be sucked and fucked? And what do I want? And then make those decisions and then take steps towards living that life versus society's version.
You killed it.
I don't know, because I sometimes I feel like I have so much in here. I feel like I talk in riddles sometimes, but that's fine. That's why I have to use those.
I think you talk clearly. I think you give very clear illustrations. I think you give very clear examples, and I think you explain it in a way that makes a lot of sense for me, anyway. Because now I'm sitting there being like, "Am I polyamorous?"
Could have told you that 6 months ago.
Oh shit! Like, bitch, since I met you, I knew your ass was probably. But yes, I thank you for coming. I super appreciate you for being here. I super appreciate just you and your intellect and your ability to communicate your thoughts clearly. I'm so particular of why I asked you for this conversation specifically. And I'm really, really grateful. And I'm very, very thankful that you've been able to come here and shed light. You know what I'm saying? Shed your light specifically on this particular conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel like after leaving this conversation, I'm like, shit, I got to go read a book, because ask me some of them questions. I'm like, I don't know. I could give you my perspective as a clinician, but you asked me to define some shit. Oh Lord, let me pull out my phone. Shit, I don't know. Oh, but no, I really thank you for having me, and I hope that something that I have said is of some sort of value.
Of course. I can already envision these actually being filled seats, honestly.
Yeah.
And you needing to have a conversation with others around all of these aspects. And I know you got other things outside of just, this particular topic. You got the whole gambit,
Yeah.
But I am super appreciative of you joining me.
Thank you.
Hey! And that is a wrap for Conversations with Nation, episode whatever this is when it gets released.
Before you stop it, Megan, so are you gonna have a drinking game during the show, like Andy
not
Cohen?
For this show.
No? Okay. You know how Andy Cohen be like, if you hear this word, da 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 da. I was thinking in my mind, I was like, if you every time you hear this word, take a shot. When I was thinking Kevin Samuels, because that fly kept coming, we kept calling him Kevin Samuels.
You can stop him.